All right, I think we're streaming on YouTube, so we are all set and ready to go. Welcome. It is February 7th. You are at the Capitol Interpretive Exhibits and Wayfinding Subcommittee. If you are on the wrong plane, please exit now. We have here Senator Landon, my good co-chair, and Representative Nicholas. Online, we have Representative Sherwood, because maybe she had too much JC yesterday and she could take. We not 100% sure about the treasurer. I imagine he'll be popping in, and the superintendent has limited availability, so she may be popping in and out online as she's able. So welcome DI, welcome agency folks. So we are called to order, and we can go ahead and jump into content outline review with Rachel.
Great, thank you so much. We're very excited to be here. I don't want to disappoint, but Nigel isn't here in person. He is on screen, although he says he is also Rachel Julo. So if you look on screen, there's a lot of Rachel Julos. It's kind of my best dream, so it's gonna be a great day. We are going to start with content and go through that outline. We'll show you the Hirschler map revisions, and we'll talk high level schedule. I do want to introduce another partner we have at DI. This is Nick King. He is our Director of Project Management. You will be hearing from him and seeing him as we get into the bulk of the work that is coming forward.
Morning, Nick. Morning. Good to meet everyone.
Thank you so much for having us today. So we're going to do a high-level content overview. Each month when we talk a little bit about what content's here, what content's there. There's a lot of content that goes throughout the entire project, throughout the Capitol and Hirschler building. So we wanted to make sure we gave you guys a tool that you could refer to as we move forward. The overall topics have not changed. Those are the same topics that were approved previously. And then we reviewed it in a little bit more depth in November. And we just continue to get just more detailed as we do more research, working with the Historical Society. So we were going to walk through today Capitol grounds, first level, second level, third level, garden level, and extension, what our overall topics are for each of those around the focuses of art and architecture, history, and government. So we're going to start with Capitol Square grounds. I will start to kick it off. As we get into more specifics, I'm going to look at Nigel and Ellie, who are both online from DI, who might be able to talk through this more. So we'll talk through Capitol Square Gardens and let you guys tell me if this is too much information for today or if you want us to keep going.
And real quick, Rachel, this is what, just so if anybody's having a hard time finding it, Eve sent this out this morning. That's that same deck, right? So you need to pull that up. Thanks, sorry.
Absolutely. We are starting to write behind this, we being the collective we between this team, the DI team, and the Historical Society. So really, we wanted to give this team a chance to look at the depth of the topics that we are writing around. And we'll put this on file stage for any additional comments. But this is what we're writing around. So it's kind of a last, yep, we're still on the right path. But again, this was, you have reviewed this maybe a little bit of a higher level earlier last year, and then at the end of last year, deeper, and this continues to get even more deep. So when we look at the square grounds, we've got several reader rails. There's one about the Capitol Square and really talking about, the history of the Capitol Square and other locations that you could visit. Another one is really about the art and architecture. So how the building campaigns were for the Capitol and the movement of the pediment. There's one around the Spirit of Wyoming. So we talk a little bit about history and art and architecture around how this came to be, background on the steamboat, bucking horse and rider trademark, as well as information about that sculptor. And we move on to a reader rail on the bison, and we'll talk about the importance of the bison to indigenous populations and overhunting, and the Odd Wyoming state flag and the state mammal, as well as art and architecture, again, information about that sculptor. We'll talk about the exterior architectural elements. We'll talk about all the different features, from the dome and the drum to the gold. And then we'll also talk about Hirschler building. So we'll do a profile of Mr. Hirschler and talk about the overall Hirschler renovation. Now that you've heard my boring voice talk for a while, we can make a decision if you want to go through each of the levels. So first level has a couple slides, second level has a couple slides, and third does. Would you like to go through the depth, and maybe the core team, if you have a point of view on if we continue to go through this? I can hit it at a high level, a higher level of speaking, and you can look at it at a deeper level on your own. Kind of a choose your own adventure today.
Mr. Co-Chair, I would say go through it, but maybe at a little bit higher level, and then we can pause you if we want to delve into.
Yeah, I think so. And this is kind of a technical question, but I wonder why our screens are so fuzzy, or is that me? I've been driving this morning, so I wish that was a little bit more defined, but please, yeah, I think that's a good approach. Co-Chair.
Can also increase and move as I go. There you go. Okay, on the first level, really taking this as a tour start, kind of a self-guided tour start, obviously. And we'll start with a panel around the People's House. We do hit on government and history and on this panel, and it has two different sides. So you talk about the overview of the government as well as responsibility of citizens. And then we also have a double-sided panel talking about the architecture and the building finishes. So the original building construction, the campaigns to continue to renovate, the very high level of what they will see. So again, kind of a breadcrumb of go look at these things that are in levels 1 through 3 and how they can be found. There's connections to cattle barons there, talking about this being a historic national landmark, as well as the painted ceilings. In addition, on the first level, we have the suffrage panels. So on the first panel, really talking about the overall concept of suffrage and what that meant in a historical context. There'll be different people that will be called out, some of the key players. And then on panel 2, again, talking about more of the individuals that were highlighted, as well as how women got involved in politics and that call to action. And then in the meeting rooms, and these are the things we discussed, I think, in the last subcommittee meeting, maybe 2 subcommittee meetings ago. And in the meeting rooms, we'll have meeting rooms that will be named or branded by a significant Wyoming suffragist, frame photos of them, as well as panels to give additional context. In the rotunda, we get into the elected officials and those building finishes. So we'll go through State Superintendent of Public Instruction, State Auditor, Secretary of State, and State Treasurer. For each of those, we talk about the overall role of that in the state government, and then call out individual features of art and architecture that's around that particular office. In that area, we'll also have an interactive kiosk, a brochure rack, and a visitor sign-in.
Where are those four building panels located? For electeds listed.
Those are right outside the doors, I believe, for their offices.
Yeah, I want to
That's
make sure one of us understand what we're doing in the rotunda there.
Okay.
So I appreciate the representative's question, Madam Co-Chairman. Just so these are panels that could be moved, but they will be ideas to put them in just outside the doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which doors? You have 2 side doors that are basically right by the stairs.
Mhm.
Then you have the 2 of the doors have a little wraparound, so there's room kind of in those locations.
Yeah. Nigel, can you speak to that? Or the other Rachel?
Yeah, there's a couple of, can you hear me?
Yep.
There's a couple of, the state auditor is right there facing into the rotunda. So the panel would be right now where there isn't actually a little exhibit that living there right now, in fact, with I think there's a ledger in there. So it would take the place of that. Similar position for the Secretary of State on the other side. Nothing lives right in the heart of the rotunda. And then Superintendent of Schools would be outside the door, which is almost close to the top of the stairs that go down to the garden level. Equally the same for the State Treasurer on the other side. The interactive kiosk is just outside the door to the docent's office. So is the brochure rack.
And Nigel, I'm just curious about what else will be on display? I just, in terms of just any other items that will be placed in the rotunda.
There's nothing else, just these items listed here, plus the wayfinding elements. And the only wayfinding element in that direct area, and it's not even in the rotunda proper, is the map wayfinding that sits halfway between the docent's office and where the rotunda starts. It's just, I think it's like parallel to where the office doors for the auditor and the secretary of state are. And Ian, correct me if I'm wrong there.
Thank you. And then let's go back to the meeting rooms and the naming of the rooms. There's only 2 rooms. And so you've got various names listed there. And I want to make sure that what exactly you have in mind, and when they're branded and you have photos of the individuals and where those would be.
We in the last meeting there was also a request to consider naming the executive conference room on that wing as well. So that's where the 3rd room comes from. The intent is to capture one gorgeous portrait of the individual and have that on one wall, and then on an adjacent wall have a like a half-size panel, half the size of those panels that are currently down in the garden level, where we would tell the story and include any supporting images that would tell the story of the individual that's ultimately selected to be named for the room to be named after.
What do you envision of the name, how and when the naming process has to take place and what it's going to look like?
We need to work with the Historical Society, the core team, and yourselves to nail down precisely who the room should be named after. The name would be featured on the glass panel of the doors as you enter into the room. We will obviously keep the room number W110 or W113 so that for logistics and for wayfinding, the name of the person would also be rendered on the glass in the same sort of gold and black plotted vinyl. I don't think I answered all your questions, or did I?
So the timing of that is now. We are going through with the Historical Society as they research and give recommendations on top 5. I don't know that we settled on a number to vote on or to choose from, but we'll just selection from there, which one makes sense.
Well, so I just want to make sure that everyone understands the process and how the final decisions on that will be made. Because there will be input from the legislation. And it may not be what this group recommends. And so what we need is a time enough to have both entities review it and have the ability to have input. I just want to make sure that people are aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one little other feedback, and I apologize if I'm plowing ground, but because I know I missed one meeting, so this might have been discussed there, but the executive conference room is not really public. I mean, I like the idea of like, oh, the more people we can feature, the better, but the executive conference room feels like a stretch to me. Just my sort of my knee-jerk reaction. It's generally locked. It's not available to the public. I don't know that there's a desire to have it be open all the time. And in fact, I think particularly the AG's office is a heavy user of that and schedules that. So that's just my knee-jerk reaction about that.
I would concur with that. It's not a public.
And I frankly don't remember the dialogue on how that room was selected.
The room is gorgeous. It's got this beautiful treatment on the ceiling, the fireplace, and other fixtures in there make it a kind of a beautiful from an art and architecture point of view. But we don't have any pressing need from DI's perspective that needs to be included. It gives us the opportunity to recognize 3 people instead of 2, which is beneficial. But it's entirely up to this group as to whether or not it should or should not be included.
Does anybody else have strong opinions or opinions at all? Like I said, it's not available for public use. It's not available to walk into.
Madam Chairman, sometimes the door is open and inevitably, because it's so beautiful, people do wander in there, but it shares the wall with one of the attorneys. And oftentimes don't want to speak for him, but if I was in the same position, I would not want a bunch of visitors coming in while I was trying to work.
I would, yeah. And again, yeah, I would sort of lean towards not including that unless somebody.
Chairman, I guess I don't have a strong feeling one way or another. Even if it's only used by our professional staff, our executive branch, I guess if it recognizes somebody, I don't have a lot of heartburn for that. But anybody else have a take on that?
It also doesn't have a glass door, so you can't, and so when it's locked and when it's closed, which meaning it's locked as it's supposed to be, I think most of the time, you can't see into it either
Yeah, good point.
So would you want to remove the naming as well? Or keep the name on the door and not have the inside exhibit?
So I think the naming issue should be presented to the chief executive's office and to the electeds to see if they're interested in it.
Does the Historical Society have any, I guess, historical context of that room as far as anything that happened of any note in that area of the building?
Hello, good morning. Not offhand, I don't have any information on the executive conference room. But I'm sure that some historical things have happened there because that's a place where it's an executive meeting room, and so some decisions have been made in there. But not offhand, I don't have a historical story to go with that room.
You know, I just don't know whether, you know, Teddy Roosevelt had a fireside chat in there or something like that, you know, I mean, but I'd say, yeah, get some research, whatever you can. And it is, I think, the executive's branch's prerogative to maybe weigh into that. So that's just my thought on it.
Thanks, Treasurer. Yeah, and again, I'm hesitant to spend a lot of time and or money on interpretation that is close to the public 95%.
Madam Chair, I kind of agree with you because the other rooms are named and there's something I can go into. I'm gonna be curious why I can't go into, like, if that's the Nellie Taylor Ross room, like, why can't I go in and experience if I can go into Esther Hobart and Louisa Swain?
Yeah.
So I think from a tourism perspective, it's very awkward.
So maybe we're leaning towards no unless we find out that there was, you know, some remarkable historical event.
So I just had a little bird tell me that originally we were supposed to put a glass door on the room. But someone named Michael Donald, who had an office in there, said he didn't want a glass door. But the reason they wanted the glass pane was because it's a pretty room.
It is a pretty room. It's a small room, but
It's a shame that oversight committee didn't get that corrected.
Mr. Chairman, I am the little bird. I just was gonna give context for the fact that originally any room that the public could either look into or see into was supposed to be clear. And that was supposed to be a clear room because of the ornate painted ceiling and the fireplace in there. And then as these things happen, it became a discussion about, at that time, that space was supposed to be joint scheduled for any of the statewide elected officials. to be able to hold meetings over there. And then it kind of just became more of a private space over time. And as the project concluded, it was decided to have it be opaque glass.
I think it actually does, we use it for meetings sometimes. I don't know about the treasurer, but I think we know it's available to us.
I've never been invited to a meeting.
We're gonna have a meeting there at break at 10:45.
There you go.
And I
All
felt
right.
like, I don't wanna see this.
Well, Senator Landon, now that I know that I can have a meeting there, we'll get together soon.
Boy, that sounds great, Treasurer. I appreciate that.
Okay.
It's on the bucket list.
So I do think it'd be worthwhile, go ahead, have a quick another peek at the room and see what it takes just to put a glass door on.
Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, this might be a good chance to bring up something I've been thinking about for quite some time, but we just hadn't gotten to the nitty-gritty. But with thinking about the other elected officials' rooms that are ceremonial, so they're not there most of the year, the door is closed. And I know walking through there, that's always felt like, well, there's just these closed doors. My thought at one point was, would it be possible to leave, and I'm thinking specifically of the superintendent's office there, leave the door open, but with a little brass post and velvet rope kind of a thing, so that people could see in, they could see the beautiful picture on the wall over the fireplace, see the executive office. And I'm thinking maybe the same type of thing for that boardroom, if it wasn't a glass door ad, if it was just more of a little, like, you don't go in here, but you can look and see, and it's pretty. And they've got the little sign there. I don't know. I mean, they're really elegant. They don't feel like roped off. They feel like more like that. Like, you can look, but this isn't a public access. I don't know. It's just something.
Yeah, I think that's an operational question we could probably consider apart from this project. I mean, and again, we keep a whole bunch of computer equipment in there. So like,
Yeah.
so it's hard to not, I mean, if that was the idea, we would basically have to clear out, if that makes sense, or have it staffed to some extent.
Yeah, and I think only in those really pretty rooms, and like I said, the superintendent of public education's entryway with the fireplace is clean. It's there's nothing kept in there. So, and I don't know about the treasurer's office or not, but same thing with the boardroom. I wouldn't imagine things get stored in there, right? So it would be a clean
The boardroom
space.
is pretty empty. It just has, it has a TV, but.
But only those areas that we would want people looking in, I suppose.
Well, Madam Chairman, I really appreciate there've been good comments on both sides of this. The one of our major thrust points, I think, as a subcommittee has been to show this building off. I mean, relatively open has kind of been our approach. So maybe take a look. I think that's a good suggestion that was just made, you know. But anyway, I don't know if we're prepared, if we need to vote on this today or, you know. I kind of favor anything being open that we can have open for people to look at this beautiful place.
Mr. Chairman, and we could ask DI if this is accurate, but I believe Wyoming Historical Society is researching suffragists. That would be the idea, since that's suffrage hall. It wouldn't be that we'd name it after Madam Auditor. So there's only a handful, perhaps we might. So there's a handful of suffragists, and I would guess that when that presentation is made to you to make your choice, at that point, you could decide.
Yep. Are
Which
there
rooms
3
to
really
include?
strong candidates, or maybe only 2 that, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's a good suggestion, Wendy. And I wonder, in the meantime, is there, you and Treasurer Meyer and others on the executive branch side, maybe a little research or communication with folks and see if anybody feels strongly the other way. And I guess we can take it up when it's presented to us, right?
I do one more
suffrage?
No, I think just no on that executive conference room, and I like Bob's idea, or whoever's idea, that we maybe walk over and take a look at it during break. It's an attractant, if it's open, it's an attractant to people during the session to go in and sit and use it, which can be, so it just, as we think about this, if it is open to the public, which I like some of the thoughts around that, they might get kicked out in 30 seconds by, no, you can't, nope, you can't take your call in here. Nope, you can't sit and work. You know, we're gonna have people sitting, working on computers in there. Because there's not really a good place in the Capitol for anybody to sit quietly with a computer. So just an operational, and I mean, I know that's just for session, but it's a, so maybe I guess maybe a conversation with the AG too, because where we all use it, I think the AG's office uses it a lot more than.
And that would make sense if we put a glass pane door in there. And then you can just say it's a private executive around the conference room and during the session, you have to keep it locked.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there can be some in between solutions there for sure.
They can go to Lily's room, make calls.
So as we continue on the first level, the east wing and the governor's area, so there's a double mobile panel there. Can't get that to move. Okay, so we'll do there's a history and architecture that will be featuring there. We'll do the profile on Nellie Taylor Ross and her portraits. We'll talk about the columns that are there, as well as the ceremonial conference room. We'll have artifact labels for the governor's portraits, and we'll also have artifact labels for Potter's Bowl for that painting. And then we are working on what was before called Historic Voices that we talked about last time, Governor's Gallery, and that's an activation that will be coming. Moving to the second level. So we've got both the Senate chamber lobby and the House chamber lobby. So this panel will be in the center when it's not in session, and then during that session, it will sit outside of the lobbies. So we'll talk about the duties and responsibilities of both the Senate and the House respectively, what the difference is on their membership, those terms, how they deliberate, and how they work. And then we'll go each on history. There will be some profiles on some former members, and then we'll talk about the art and architecture within that area. The artifact labels as well, and the information kiosk will be kiosks. In the rotunda, you have the territorial council and the House chamber. So just like with the others, we'll have these panels sitting out most of the time when it's not in session, and then when it is in session, those will move to one side. History for both of them. We'll talk about the location, again, history behind each, and the art and architecture description of the room, the locations, and art that is there. Kind of speeding through here, so let me know if you want me to slow down. We'll also have the reader rail. So on the first reader rail for suffrage, we're talking about this is right outside the room where it happened. So that'll be a key point. We'll show that in terms of government in action and how William Bright followed the measure and took responsibility for it and finally forced its passage. And the second reader rail, again, we're focusing on suffrage as a way to talk about government in action. And this will focus on Governor Perry and a senator in the emergency session they called to pass the 19th Amendment.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I don't think we want reader rails on the second floor. That's just my opinion. And I don't think we want to overdo suffrage again because we've got a whole section.
We did talk about this in the last session, and I believe one of the things that we are able to do with these reader rails is that they are going to be movable, so they can move an area in times of high traffic or events. So we're going to have little feet on the bottom so that they can move somewhere else and be set elsewhere. And for these, we're wanting to make sure that the story is about government in action, and it happens to be told through the process.
Yes, jumping in about the story that we're the first floor on suffrage, we're really focusing on citizen activism and citizens getting involved in their government. And then on the second story where we're outside of the room where it's happened and also the room where it's currently happening, really on that second floor, that we're talking about government in action. And so really two different aspects of that suffrage story that makes a whole.
I'll just reemphasize, I'm not a big fan of the government in action concept of having, you're walking through the state capitol and the idea that we want to promote you to get out, get a sign and protest out on the front steps, or to do the things that other than participating in government. I just think we have to be careful about it. It's not, purpose isn't to activate, but so I'm not a fan of the concept. And I can almost assure you the legislative majority will not be either.
Yeah, I can't argue with the representative on that. I do think there's some lines there.
Well, and and I'll just be very candid. I'm struggling a little bit with this one. I believe the committee voted and confirmed this decision. I was not there, which is no one's fault but my own. But I know we've gone back and forth on the reader rails about 12 times so far, so I'm not sure if there's a good path. I don't want the rug pulled out from under DI or the Historical Society at the last minute, so I'm not sure what a good path to
Well, it
move
won't be at the
forward
last
is.
minute, because the complaint and discussion's been going all the time, and this is going back to my conversation earlier, is that this committee is not gonna make that ultimate decision. It's gonna make a recommendation. At some point, will be a refined group of either legislators and or executives that have the final say on what it's gonna look like. So I don't want to think that this is the end all and say all of a large working group that are making recommendations.
So, Madam Chairman, just to kind of go back over what I think tipped it in favor of a limited number of reader rails on that second floor. I think the design, which would allow for the removal of those during off times, during session, during whatever, was intriguing. I think I'm reflecting the conversation that we had. The second piece of that is all of the work that the Historical Society has contributed, and it's impressive. And I think that was compelling to me, that some of the work and the encouragement that we include some of the things that they have suggested tipped it in favor for me. So, but the representative is right. Really, we've known all along in this subcommittee, all we're doing is making recommendations. That's really what we do. We're not the final decision point. So I hope that helps. And if any of the subcommittee members wants to chime in on that, I hope that reflects what I think tipped it back into favor of a limited number of reader rails upstairs.
Representative Sherwood has her hand up.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to chime in and say that I personally am comfortable with the information as it's been presented to us. I'm excited about being able to use different lenses to understand the story of the building and what makes Wyoming government unique, in terms of being able to look at it from, what does government in action look like in terms of process? And what is, as an individual, my role in government look like in terms of advocacy and making my voice heard and getting involved. And I didn't even think about protests. I just thought about, an engaged citizenship. And so personally, I'm very comfortable with where we're at. And I am so thrilled to see some of these little nuggets of history bubbling up that we're able to then share with our colleagues and with the public through the committee's work. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's dug in and gone down those rabbit holes. And you get way more information than you can use on a panel. So then you also have to distill all of that for us. So just wanted to say thank you and good work.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for everybody. We have some inside information that it might be your birthday today. Is that the truth?
Happy birthday.
Thank you all. I do adore you and I do adore this work, but the thought of being able to go out and hike with my dogs after this swayed me to stay home. So
We would have had a cake. We would have had a cake for you though.
Thank you.
Well, have a wonderful day. We'll try to get you out of here early.
And I just want to point out, I don't mean to be drunk. But if you look at the makeup of the legislators who are on this committee, Bill, me, and Trey, we're considered to be rhinos and far leftists. When the majority on both sides, almost, are just the opposite. And so if something pops up that doesn't fit or that is, too far, then someone is going to put their foot down. And so that's kind of what we want to prevent so that we don't kind of cause an insurrection.
Yeah, I think that's, at the risk of oversharing, I think the representative waded into some water that can get really deep in a hurry. And we've worked very hard as legislators. I think I speak for all three of us just to try to make sure that we're able to defend and present this well, because the makeup of the legislature isn't always easy to understand.
So, well, and I think, and I do think we will have to revisit this 12 more times, but for now, I think that, we've said from day one, let the content drive what we do and what we put up. So I think as we see, we are still a long ways from drilling holes in the marble, right? So I think when we see these panels and what they will have on them and what we will be either gaining or giving up by having or not having them, I think we can make this isn't the last bite of the apple for sure. So I think we may be able to make a more informed decision when we see what we have in Suffrage Hall, what we have on the second floor, and either say, oh, Suffrage Hall's enough, or nope, we don't want to lose what might go on these reader panels. And so I think until we see that, it is hard to make a final decision.
Okay, yeah, that's not a problem. I think I hear you. I know Kylie hears you in terms of how we walk that line in terms of advocacy and citizenship and activation. So we can be careful about how far that goes. I think that's a little bit different than the suffrage story. So we'll watch both sides of that.
And Madam Chairman, I'd like to make it clear though that I think that one of our goals should be to tell the whole suffrage story. And if we find ourselves with too many static displays, then we have to probably resort to an interactive display. So and then if we're looking at trying to tell other stories of Wyoming that is I guess their story is really as a result of the state capitol and the work that's done in the state capitol, and find out what those stories are, because I think we need to at least address the historical perspective there. I have, I guess, no consternation about how many people want to stand outside on the stairs and I guess exhibiting their right to free speech. I have to me, they can do it every day if that's what they want to do, because this is still America, and we still have the right for free speech. So from the standpoint that any of these things look like they might incite people to tell us what we should be doing in government, that's probably a good thing. So it's maybe, you know, a little bit from time to time, it could lead to inefficiencies in our process. But I think that we're guilty of that in our own right of providing multiple inefficiencies throughout a legislative session in the whole year. So, you know, I would hope that we understand that we want to tell the whole suffrage story, and we want to be able to have I guess a good amount of flavor and spice with the rest of what has happened in Wyoming through the governmental process. So if we reach those goals, I think that we've done our duty of giving the legislators and the executive branch plenty of room to make the right decision. So with that, I'm fine with these removable type of rails, and whether or not it has suffrage on it or not. I think it goes back to the question is, do we tell the whole story in the suffrage wing, and do we have other stories to tell outside of it? So you guys have done a remarkable job putting a lot of this stuff together, but let's keep our eye, I guess, on what the goals are, and some of this stuff is just I think frivolous thoughts that need not enter into the decision-making process.
Thanks, Treasurer. I think those are wise words, and like I said, I think at least for now we can keep on going and address these more in detail when we see the final content. Oh, sorry, Kylie, go ahead. Sorry, I can't see everybody.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to thank everyone for their comments. That's extremely helpful to me as a content creator. And I also wanted to just maybe give a little bit of reassurance that there is a call to action when we're talking about the citizen involvement in the suffrage story. And I really, with a lot of this content, and not just the suffrage content, that we're trying to marry this the history with the fact that this is a working capital, and that this is currently where our government sits and makes these decisions. And so when it comes to this story in particular, the call to action for citizens, we're giving them really healthy ways to engage with government, where we're going to be encouraging them to contact their representatives directly and to run for office. I think that those are two of the call outs that we have for citizens that is represented in the historic stories that we're sharing. And then when it comes to government in action, we get to tell the story of how a bill is passed, which is really amazing and something that's still pertinent to today, as well as how an emergency session is called. And I think that these are really two great stories about that the history can represent and bring forward something of, hey, this is how your government works. And so we're doing a lot more than just telling the suffrage story, as well as sharing, hey, this is a working capital. This is the seat of Wyoming government. Here's how you can get involved in a healthy way and engage in a healthy way. And also, here is how the government works to pass bills that impact you in your life. And thank you again to everybody for their comments. That really helps a lot, especially when it comes to framing this and making sure that it's going to be able to pass through the legislature.
Thank you so much. We just continually appreciate the life you've breathed into this project. Not to not to be a mean old school mom here, but we're a third away through this presentation. We have 15 minutes left. So
That's
if
right.
you're grateful, we will,
Looking at it well. So I might hit a little faster. if That's what we
that'd be super.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we also have the Constitution Interactive that we're gonna have in the historic Supreme Court that is in progress. And you guys will see progress as we move forward with that. Third level, the Senate Gallery and the House Gallery both have double-sided mobile panels. Again, those will be very visible in the 10 to 11 months of the year when they're not in session. Otherwise, they will be moved over to one side of the vestibule. So there's not interaction there. Interference, I mean, so there's government, so we'll tie into the information that was from the second floor, but described a little bit differently. Art and architecture will be in there as well. And then information kiosks and brochure racks will be in those. And then the rotunda, we'll talk through Joint Appropriations Committee on a panel. We'll talk about, you know, the role, what they do, the power of the purse, talk about art and architecture. Again, we'll talk about the vaulted ceiling and the historic Supreme Court gallery. We'll talk about the territorial house and Supreme Court, talking about different things that we've noted on the second floor. Reference of the Constitutional Convention stories. And then there will be 4 reading labels in that area as well, focusing on art and architecture between the glass ley light, paint restoration, the Four Sisters, and the skylights, ley lights, electricity. Too fast or are they doing good? Are they hanging on for this ride? Okay.
I'll keep my lips sealed.
When you start twitching.
Garden level in the West Wing, this is really around, a lot of it's around architecture. So we've got some new panels that are going to go up there in the elevator, talking about art and architecture, how they found those elevators during the demolition. We'll talk about exterior building materials within the vitrines, artifacts from the buildings and the original blueprints, working through that now. What we're calling opera poster and curiosities. So those wall-mounted panels will show what was found when there was construction was going on. There was some opera posters found, showing a commitment to the building, high-level finishes, really talking through, again, art and architecture there, as well as the caretakers' quarters. I know last time we talked caretakers, that got pretty lively, so we'll keep going through that. But you know that Kylie has some great stories there. And I heard some at lunch afterwards, so those might be in another panel that's not for public use. So we'll talk about the history of the original caretakers and possibly the ghost story and the death about the caretaker. Coal chute, we've got a freestanding mobile panel and highlight that coal chute and exterior, talk about building systems and explain how that changed over time. And we are looking at adding some panels behind those coal chute doors. And we're getting ready to talk about how that content will fall in with the overall coal chutes. We'll also have a building timeline. This is an interactive exhibit that we'll be showing you in more detail, but there's lots of opportunities to tell stories within that area. And then there's also a panel that will be with it that'll really highlight the construction and talk at a high level about the building. And then there's going to be several architectural artifacts. We've got some casework and small panels through fire alarms, maybe the toolbox.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question about the coal chute. Freestanding mobile panel.
Yeah.
What I'm curious is if the coal chute warrants to have a freestanding. And if we need one of that. And it looks like you've got 2 different coal chute concepts. So is it one or the other? I'm not sure I understand that. The coal chute is you go through the doors right on the west end, get to it. And that's not, my understanding is a lot of folks that tour the building don't go through those doors. It's kind of like an office area.
Well, and I thought we sort of decided to keep it that way. Like they would literally be walking through meetings, but are we missing?
Madam Chairman, that was the reason for having that one you guys selected as mobile. That then it's something that if the doors are closed and it's not typically a public area, you can still learn about the coal chute. And if and when it is open, we do occasionally open it up for different large tour groups, then it could be moved back to that area. So everything else in the garden level is affixed to the wall. That was the only one that you selected as a mobile panel down there for that mobility. The additional coal chute panel concept behind the coal chute doors, that was actually not in scope with your project. That's actually something that I brought up to DI. We have all the time when people do open those coal chute doors, there's not coal in there anymore. There's nothing in there. It's dusty. It smells horrible. It's cold. And so I did ask DI if they could look, and Rachel and Nick are actually going to measure it today. Look at what the cost would be to just put something when you do open the door that maybe could tell you a little bit about the coal and how the building was run with coal there too, just as kind of one of those, I think DI calls it surprise and delight elements. So that was not in your original scope.
So would the freestanding panel stand on its own even when it is not next to the coal chute? Okay.
Be just
So-
like the ones on the first three.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily say the coal chute you see here.
Yeah, in fact, it'll give, if I recall, can't remember if the images ended up on the electronic timeline or here, but the idea is when the doors are closed that you can still see that. That's the only space in the whole building where you can actually see the original brick masonry that's behind all of the plaster in the building, as well as that 1890 exterior material that's just on the other side of that door. I believe that actually might be shown in the timeline.
Does it, the panel doesn't, I mean, that's a pretty narrow hallway. In the hallway. And when the doors are closed, you have it, it'd be all right, and then in the corner, you know, on the north, on the southwest side, it kind of be inside the glass panel doors.
Madam Chair, I think it's actually, I think that one's located opposite of the building timeline. And DI did field verify all those locations, and I believe it sits to the right of the vision glass that's in that area.
That sound right?
That's correct.
My memory's hazy.
By the way, for what it's worth, Madam Chairman, I appreciate, Wendy, your thoughts on the coal chute. I mean, that makes sense that we leave that unfinished. There should be, we could actually, I would imagine the coal came from Hannah Elk Mountain at that time, right? Might have to get the appropriate chunk of coal. That's different than Gillette coal. Anyway, I like the idea of it.
I suggested we put chairs in there until ghost stories, but I was vetoed, so. Something more legitimate.
And then he was crushed by a pile of coal.
Slipping on a banana. Okay, you guys thought I went fast before. I've got 3 minutes to get through the rest of this. Okay, so we've got some, as we look at the garden level entrances, we've got the panels there that help they replaced the panel brochure rack. We've got the brochure rack that's there, as well as the interactive kiosks. We've got wall hung panels and the northeast interest for indigenous peoples. I don't know why I cannot say that word today. We've got Cree territory, Cheyenne, again as a wall hung panel, as well as Wyoming territory and Wyoming statehood. And then in the, sorry.
So they'll be essentially the ones that we've been marking up and looking at this whole time, those will be duplicated in each vestibule for each, or that's the thought.
On the indigenous people, it does say Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho, but are we looking into like the Crow? We're very significant up in northern.
Yeah,
Montana. Sorry, northern Wyoming. And I mean, there were definitely other tribes because we were plains that came through here, so I think we need to be careful and just limit it to the two that are here.
Okay.
If we're talking to as a historical perspective.
Yep, absolutely. And I know Tom had some strong points of view on how we approach that. Tom from Historical Society, so. We also talk about restoration at the garden level in the rotunda. So how the restoration of the vaults and the importance of them. We have the stage vault and we kind of gone through that. a couple meetings ago, things that could be inside. So we'll be providing more details of what we're gonna be putting inside, but did note what we had heard that could have been in there. We'll have artifact labels with the Mosler vaults, and we'll direct them to see the vault exhibit. And then we have guard shack rotating artifacts. We're working through that now. It wasn't necessarily in scope, but something that I know the core team thought might want to be considered as we move forward.
We have samples of what the 4 small panels look like. Looks like that's new.
I believe we have seen that. I don't know, we have sample sizes, Nigel, that we've gone through.
I missed the first part of that question.
Are you talking about the wall hung panels?
Entry panels and 4 small panels.
Oh, the entry panels.
Yeah, there's the set of 4 panels in each of those vestibules, and then there's a half height panel above the brochure racks in each one of those vestibules. We've shown renders of all those wall hang in previous decks. I'm not sure I understand the question.
So it looks to me that it says it's new. I'm wondering if this is something different than we've seen before. These smaller panels replaced.
Okay. I'm sorry. Now I caught up. Originally, those panels are the sort of welcome panels that help people to understand what kind of experience and help to plan their day and encourage them to look at different things and even to visit alternate locations within the capital area. We're going to be incorporated into a different version of the brochure rack. So there would be, a third of the brochure rack would be dedicated to this graphic panel. That didn't give us enough space, and the cost of developing that brochure rack seemed too much. Plus, also the placement of it needed to move because we were going to use underneath the stairs for the kiosks. So we've got the kiosks there now. The brochure racks now moved into the vestibule, and there are actually only 2 of them. And we're changing from a graphic panel that is part of the brochure rack into a separate panel that lives above the brochure rack and is mounted the same way as a set of 4 would be as well, with those little clips or for aesthetics. Those are the clips up at the top third.
I misspoke when I wrote new in here. We have been working on those, so those are not new.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I mean, it's a change, but it's not new. It's just we've just changed how we're doing it.
Madam Chair, this was essentially, as Nigel was saying, it was a cost-cutting measure when you got the ROM costs. And so basically it became a freestanding panel that's smaller, but would otherwise look like all your other panels.
Yeah.
So we'll still have the brochure racks below them?
Yes.
Yeah, we can work with DI to get something mocked up for you guys to see, but essentially it's just a smaller version of the the attached mobile panel.
Okay.
On the wall, but we can work with DI to show you something like
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Are we having brochure racks in every vestibule?
Oh, okay, great.
Just 2 of them.
That sounded like.
Address the subcommittee, but it's nice to see some of this, the beginnings of fleshing this out, and some of the content is kind of fun and interesting. Can't wait to see it.
So for the garden level in the east wing, we'll continue with the governor's office and gallery. So we'll have a niche with the vitrine that talks about the historic governor's mansion. Encourage visitation there. We'll have the artifact labels around the governor's portrait. We'll also have the historic vault. We'll have a wall panel there. And then we'll have the governor's gallery, or what was formerly known as Historic Voices. As we look at capital extension, looking at what's going on in the meeting rooms in terms of lettering and state seal and photographs. So we're still working through the branded names of those. We talked a little bit through that in the last meeting and visuals that would go there. So we're continuing down that path, as well as in the Capitol Auditorium, having the state seal and framed photographs of iconic Wyoming places as well as wall-mounted panels. And the conference rooms, we'll also have graphic vinyl. We showed some of those as well, and wall-mounted panels. We'll have the Hall of Senators and Hall of Representatives. There'll be FCOs and wall-mounted panels. And then for both the statues, we'll have artifact labels for those. We've got an interactive kiosk that will be in this area, as well as adding some visuals to the Legislative Copy Center and the Capitol Gallery, the FCO and the Capitol Gallery.
Do we have accommodation, or have we thought about accommodation for where the next 15 or 10 or 15 governors' portraits will go?
We've talked a little bit about that. I don't think we have a solution yet. Nigel can correct me, but I know it's something that we've discussed.
Yeah, there's room for, and Kevin, you might have this math in your head more than I do, since you were involved actually, maybe it wasn't Kevin, maybe it was Rihanna and Wendy, and hanging the ones that are now. But there's room for additional on those two walls down in that primary hallway and the extension. And then we would need to, I think the conversation was that we would need to go back to the halls where they were originally to expand back to there, but at least the most contemporary ones would stay in the primary hall there. Is that, it's been a little while since we had this conversation, so, but that's my most recent memory.
I think Nigel is talking about the composites.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, for
Okay.
the governor's portraits, the answer is really no. I mean, there's the space kind of behind the highway patrol desk where Nellie was originally hanging before moving into that waiting area. There are the two territorial portraits in the waiting area that, you know, could potentially eventually take those down to make more room for the more contemporary governors in that space. But if we're talking about the next 10 or 15, I mean, there really is not space unless we start moving into the actual governor's suite to hang those. You can or the ceremonial conference room as well. So that will be something that we have to figure out, or do we start rotating? I mean, that's been a conversation as well to say, you know, we'll
So
start
it
pulling
seems to
them
me
down.
we probably ought to have a plan or a recommendation for it. Because one of the places they would go would be those 4 entry doors, niches in the garden level. Would be a logical place for them. So we may not want to take up too much of that space or design that space for future expansion. So we ought to have a plan.
I don't, that's a great point. I would know that, I mean, I think, you know, things could change, but when we talk about the next 10 or 15 governors, that's 100 years. So probably there's gonna be a lot. Probably these panels are gonna have to be taken down by then. So, but I think maybe for the next.
It could be 4 years for 10.
It could be, but if we look at, yeah.
And we also have governors where we don't have portraits. And there's been discussion or a plan to find photos or something that we can then have something to commemorate those individuals as well. And that's, how many is that, you know?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. What we have are the portraits for all the governors who were elected. So governors who kind of succeeded from Secretary of State, and they did not win or did not run in the subsequent election. They did not commission portraits for those governors when they did that project 10 years or so ago. You know, I think we've discussed in terms of the digital kiosks with that idea that you'd be able to look up past elected officials. There would be a spot there for those governors and portrait, you know, photographs or portraits, I suppose, of them in that context. But we have not really discussed commissioning oil paintings to go with the other ones.
So are all the governor's portraits that we have, are they all?
Yes, yeah. And I think there's probably reasonably room for 3 or 4 more in the existing spaces before we have to start thinking about what other spaces we might want to put them in.
And again, realistically, that probably gets us through the life of these panels. And unless we have a unusual level of turnover, which is always possible, but.
Through our lives anyway.
So Madam Chairman, I've got a quick question regarding the Hall of Senator, Hall of Representatives plaques down at the extension over here. Will that reference the locations of other composites at that point? Is that the idea that the ones you see here in the extension are not the only composites? You can go upstairs to find the originals. I assume that we will cross-reference,
Yeah,
right?
breadcrumbs to each one.
Okay, thank you.
The temporary plaques we have there now do in fact do that. So it would be a similar approach.
Thank you, Nigel, for that.
Yeah.
So we also have the room we're sitting in now, which will be the Capitol classroom. We'll have some vinyl that's in here, as well as the exhibit that will be in the civics lab. We'll talk about the role of media in government through a panel, and then also have graphic vinyl through the path that they take, students take as they come into the building and come into the Capitol classroom. So this is all currently being worked through on what the message is, but it's talking about the importance of being an active citizen and a little bit of civics 101. And some fun. And then in the lobbies, we'll have the Capitol images that we've talked through that could possibly be a new project for DI. You guys did it. We are only 11 minutes over. Sorry.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel. We will look forward to exploring that more. If Nigel is ready, let's go ahead and jump right into the Hirschler map review. And that's in the same deck that we were working with.
Correct. I will try to zoom in as Nigel is walking through it. There's been a lot of discussion through this with the core team. Really appreciate everybody's effort on this. Been a lot of throwing good ideas out in the trash to come up with better ideas to try to get things simplified and clear. Nigel? You're on mute. That was me stalling.
This is going to be a team thing. Ian and I are going to kind of walk through this, and Ian probably knows this better than I. He's done the meat of these final adjustments. So we got some really good feedback that I think will help to resolve this particular map, but then also will be reflected in the 3 or 4 other maps that we are finalizing out for the other locations. So we can start by looking at this Hirschler map, and here we've tried to address all the concerns. We've gone back and forth a number of times with the core team to make sure we are identifying any communication issues and making sure that this works really effectively. We've really streamlined the layout a lot so that there's not more information than you need, but there's enough information for you to feel oriented where you're at. We've added some additional information that hadn't been there before, so it's a little clearer about where you're at, and we've taken some information away where it was just too redundant. First of all, one of the most prominent things that we wanted to make sure people noticed was the simple "You Are Here" token. It had that gold color and other details. Now we just really simplified it. It's just a white call out with a dark bronze color type and a little icon, so that your eye goes directly to it. And the only other place that we've used white is to indicate the 4 different lobbies, which is the sort of next level of getting people oriented and helping them to navigate through the space. So we've identified those as A, B, C, and D for the center lobby, south lobbies, so people can quickly see that if you are here by D, they can look down by D and see precisely what's immediately accessible from the lobby that they're standing in. So that makes that really clear. We've got rid of the little niche details that have indicated doorways and just used a small little arrow to indicate entry areas, so people understand that even though that's a big yellow or gold box, the way to get into it isn't at that particular location. So the orientation is a little more easy to understand. We've got rid of indications to doorways so that people can just see the flow of the space and not be disoriented by nuances in the map and have a quicker, clearer understanding of where they're going to. We've been a little more consistent in our use of upper and lowercase type, using that for naming of small spaces, using all caps for naming of the buildings specifically. Highlighting that capital extension clearly through the middle there, you see that, and then Hirschler West and Hirschler East up above to show the different layers. We've added a much darker and dominant cast shadow from the Hirschler West and Hirschler East buildings, so you can see that one lays on top of the other, that they build up from there. So that makes it a little more clear that we're talking about different levels, and then use language on the map itself that helps to indicate that like this is Hirschler West lower level underground and Hirschler East lower level underground. We've to help people understand access to the extension and the two different buildings and how they're connected at the lower level. We've just combined that into one listing at the very bottom, so that people can see that the lower level is accessible from all four. It's the same, instead of just redundantly repeating that same content for each one. That's kind of the top overview. Ian, is there anything else that you think we should highlight?
I think you caught it for the most part. Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you again. I think you covered it for the most part. One thing that we did change, another thing that we worked on, Julo, if you can go 2 slides ahead. So we worked on looking at the verbiage to include for the public meeting rooms as well as for the conference rooms, trying to get consistent with the verbiage and the numbering from the code signage in the space, as well as the gold vinyl on the doors and the verbiage on these maps. So we are moving away from just public meeting room 1 or 2, and we are working in the full code number, which is W002E001, as well as for the conference rooms, just adding in that third number into the name. So it's a very clear one-to-one between what is in the code signage, but then what is also in the meeting agendas where it uses the full W3 number digit. You might have said this, but when we were simplifying the overall architecturalness of the plans, we are now relying on arrows to indicate where visitors are to enter these different spaces. But I think that's it.
Super simple to read, super easy to read. Let me know if you want me to zoom in on any portion of it.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention one thing, and that is the superintendent did request that instead of saying Superintendent of Public Instruction's office, it will just say State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And we've talked to DI about change.
Correct. And we have that, and we are working on implementing that change. But that came after we pulled together this presentation.
Another addition that we've added that I think is really helpful that Core Greek kind of pushed us to suggested was indicating the bus drop off and pick up and the street names up there. So it's as you're standing in that lobby, you kind of walked in from Central Avenue and you know where that helps you to orient yourself in the larger space. Or if you're a teacher kind of lost after a day of touring, they look at this map and it's really easy to go back to where they started at the bus drop off.
So, well, just as co-chairman, as a matter of clarification, so we will remove the word office from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, but the word office will remain on all of the other
Yes.
That is
folks in the
correct.
building.
That was my understanding.
That's what I heard.
Is that a good thing? Do we want them different like that? It seems to me that it would beg the question, why do we use the word office on anybody? If we don't want it on one, but I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I guess from my perspective on the treasurers, in the capital, I just say just treasurer or state of Wyoming treasurer, or state treasurer, one or the other, but the office, it really isn't my working office, so that's a little bit of a misnomer,
Well, Treasurer, we're talking about the Hirschler building, so.
Oh, you're talking about the Hirschler building?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the hard
Yeah.
fact is one of our names is a lot longer than the rest of us.
Yeah,
It's hard to be consistent. and not-
I think it's fine, and I don't mean to bog us down on that.
Yeah.
I think we've tried throughout the months together to be as consistent as we can be, and DI's helped us with that and encouraged that, and so I had to.
And Mr. Chair, we did talk about that, about leaving office on, and I don't think the superintendent is necessarily opposed to that. But it could potentially drop that down to a third line.
Then it's gonna bump to a third line, exactly. So, I get it. I will stand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair, I think too, if I remember back, the conversation was because there are, to the treasurer's point, there's a working office and then the ceremonial office. And I think that's where some of that discussion of like, this is their office, like that word kind of connotates, this is where you'll find them. But I think maybe that's where that was originally in the language. I just trying to remember back.
Yeah, Paul, I think that's where that germinated, where that started.
Yeah. Well, if we got room, I don't have a problem with it.
Great. The other thing to keep in mind with all of these maps is these are, at least the interior maps, these Hirschler maps are, they are easy to update verbiage over time as offices move or names change or get altered. We have sort of an easy way to update that information. These are not tooled bronze signs that will cost buku dollars to update.
And that is the industry term.
Yeah, I love the dimensions. I like the shadow dimension of the Hirschler building on the map, so. It helps you to understand that there are 4 different levels.
Do we want to consider this approved or additional time?
I believe you'll be putting the deck out on file stay with the comment period.
I think we would want a couple days just to scrutinize it.
Yeah.
Instead of just on the fly.
Yeah. It's a little small.
It is a little small.
Okay. Thank you, Nigel and Ian. You helped make up for the time that I went over. Covering me for many years now.
So if we want to move into the schedule review, that would be great, and then maybe a very brief break.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, just a shout out to Nigel. I know you've been feeling a little under the weather, so we send our karma your way and good thoughts, and we appreciate you still getting on the Zoom call today and helping us walk through this. So thank you.
Oh, bless you for that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I meant to start with a dad joke because I know Nigel likes dad jokes, so that's a big fail for today. So I wanted to give you a high level overview of where we are with the schedule. We currently are still moving through in 4 different packages. Package 1, signage and wayfinding. Package 2, the static exhibit. Package 3 are the digital exhibits. And package 4 is everything to do with the civics, so civics lab, classroom. We have some updates to share as we've been working through the project. There have been some efficiencies that have been found. There's been some inefficiencies that have been found, and we're trying to be stronger as an overall team. As I show you, whoa, went backwards. Really wanted you guys to, what happened to my schedule? Oh, I went all the way
I
to
think
the
you went to the
top.
top.
I was really excited. As I show you the schedule, you may notice that, we are a little longer than what we were before. We have had some quality control, concerns on the DI side, so we wanted to take a little pause and make sure that what you are getting is a quality product. So we do know we have room for improvement there. However, we are able to get all of package 1 and 2 installed by the end of October, assuming all the other deadlines are met. So when you go into session next year, you will be, or later this year, then after, elections, sorry, I don't know, I couldn't think of that word. After elections and, as more people are coming in the building, you will have the signage and wayfinding and static exhibits. And then as we look at package 3 and package 4, the digital and the civics, we are looking at a final install in April of 25. We have been through a lot of the design for package 3. There's a lot of content between package 3 and 4. So don't want to overload our content partners for sure. And making sure that we're getting the design set up front, and again, quality assurance at every checkpoint. That's a super high level overview. We've got an 80-page document if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, but that's where we stand. And I've been really excited about the direction of the work, where it's headed, and excited to see it come to life later this year and then into next year.
Thank you, Rachel, and I think it'll be wonderful to start seeing some of this on the ground. And again, I apologize because I haven't poured over this yet, but my one sort of thing that gives me pause on the static exhibits. Keep me honest here. I mean, essentially, we haven't seen any finalized content yet, and I am assuming that the content to review that content through this machine will take some time. That all happens by the end of March, or help me understand when this committee will be receiving that content and what the turnaround, just knowing that's probably going to be one of the bigger reviews we have to do and one of the more sensitive ones.
Absolutely. We will have content that we're going to start sharing probably later this month. And with the first round of content that you're going to see, it is going to be in design. So you will see it in a graphic layout. So it'll help you.
Like, here is the panel and here's what it's
Yes.
saying.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And then that way it gives you some sort of frame of reference. And then the packages moving forward after that will be the text templates. It will be more helpful from an efficiency standpoint to get the feedback on the text templates before we go back into design layout. But we want you guys to have an idea of what that looks like, so you have a frame of reference when you know why we say this part can only be 50 words, or this part needs to be can be 100 words.
And again, just saying this out loud, we will have to make sure we share and get some feedback on some content outside of this formal committee too. Like, for example, we have, of course, we would have to have the governor's office review the.
So I think it'll probably be a good idea for us to work with the DI to work with the core team and make sure we have the right timeframes for that. To get into print and fabrication for that second package, we know what those dates are. And so we'll make sure that it's sounds like some of those times it needs to be more than a 1-week turnaround.
I would say, especially if it's during session, I mean, it's not, these guys aren't gonna be able to review anything for next month. And I don't want to speak for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you might end up getting bigger groups than many smaller groups.
Other questions or concerns about the schedule? It feels very exciting to have the potential of having wayfinding and exhibits installed solidly before the next session.
Yeah, that's a very big deal, Madam Chairman, and I know we'll have a lot of folks interested in the coming couple of weeks who will be asking a lot about this. And so that gives the subcommittee the opportunity to say, yeah, we're going to fabrication really soon.
Promise.
We're not fabricating that. It's true.
Okay, we are actually doing good on time, so if it suits everyone, let's take a, oh, sorry, go ahead, Teddy.
No, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to give a little heads up. You may have seen a guest or two come in the room, and former director of our Veterans Affairs in Wyoming is here, Mr. Bartlebort, and he has requested an opportunity to visit with us during public comment, and that will be in a little while, but I just thought I would give you the heads up that he wanted to visit with us for a minute. So we will do that as the agenda allows us to, but I wanted to throw that out there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks, Senator. So since we're okay on time, let's do 10:15, but please, pretty please be back here at 10:15 to start. Thank you.
You're
To be merciful to our friends who have come today, we are going to maybe bump up public comment for them right now. My understanding is they'll take 10 minutes or so. And so that way they don't have to sit through all the statistics on hotel vote, that is going to be very exciting. So, with that, Mr. Barnard, I will, go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Auditor, Senator Landon, Mr. Treasurer, and members of the Wayfinding Subcommittee. Thank you for your time today. I'm Larry Bartlebort with the Wyoming National Guard Historical Society. I'd like to introduce Roz Shalisky, the managing editor of our Wyoming National Guard history book, coming to a bookstore near you. And Janet Cowley in the back here, the executive director of the Wyoming National Guard Association. We're here to discuss the Spanish-American War Memorial. Major General Porter, our Adjutant General, and Tim Shepard, the Director of the Wyoming Veterans Commission, cannot join us today and wish to convey that they also support the restoration and reinstallation of the memorial. Our slide deck might be best titled "The Hopefully Not Forgotten Memorial," because it is an important part of our Wyoming history. They cannot join us, but they do convey that support. We won't delve into the individual slide deck. I think you've all had that shared with you. If you do have questions, we're happy to answer those today whenever we're available. That's for sure. The Wyoming Spanish-American War Memorial, which depicts a soldier raising his hand to be sworn in, was dedicated to the National Guard members and is possibly one of the first statues on the Capitol grounds. Spanish-American War was the first overseas conflict in which the National Guard personnel were mobilized for overseas combat, the beginning of a long tradition of service to our state and nation. Our state museum and state archive staff have been remarkable in their efforts to assist in the research, including photos of the memorial for the slide deck and for our Wyoming National Guard history book. I want to shout out to Kevin Ramler, all the wonderful things he and his staff do, Susie Taylor and Robin Everett over at State Archives, Jennifer Alexander and Mariah Emmons at the State Museum. And then, of course, a thank you to American Heritage Center for their help in all of this work. Our Guard family has asked, where is our memorial and what is to become of it? We hope you will help us answer that question following our presentation. Please welcome Roz.
Thank you. My first commander was Colonel John Corneliuson. He was the Wyoming National Guard's public affairs officer for 20 years. But he originally came to Cheyenne in 1967 to work for the State Museum. For you see, my colonel, he loved the military, but he also loved the history. And late 2021, John died. But before he did, every time I saw him in his last years, he made me promise I would find the Spanish-American War statue and bring him home. I would promise, but really, I gotta tell you, I had no idea how to do that. So if John were here today, here's what he would tell you about the statue. Governor William Richards said to the 1899 legislature, the Wyoming Volunteer Aid Society, composed of the patriotic women of the state, have inaugurated a movement for the erection of a monument to the memory of the volunteers from this state who sacrificed their lives in maintaining the honor of their country. The state set aside $1,500 for the memorial, and the Volunteer Aid Society spent the next few years raising additional funds. On January 26, 1905, the memorial was dedicated. The Wyoming Tribune newspaper quoted Governor Bryant B. Brooks, quote, "This monument will stand for all time, not only as a memorial to our late soldiers, but also as a testimony to the noble work of Wyoming's brave-hearted women."
Through years yet unborn, it will prove an inspiration for the coming generations and infuse a greater love of country and a higher appreciation of free government and liberal institutions. Now, the statue's original installation was next to the walkway immediately leading to the Capitol's main front steps. And I thought about that as I walked in today.
Slide 6.
Yeah, there it is. And you can't imagine how long it took for us to find that particular statue picture.
Where'd you find it?
Well,
American Heritage Center.
but here's the weird thing. The president of the Wyoming National Guard Historical Society is 92, one or two. And when we would go to the State Museum, they'd go, no, it's always been on the corner there. And she said, no, I was a little girl and I remember walking up the steps and I saw that. And with that knowledge from a 90-year-old woman, we were able to get through the American Heritage Center using, I don't know, every available search word we could think of to find this picture standing right there. Well, later it was relocated to the corner of Central Avenue and West 24th Street. However, the statue's base was incorrectly installed in that new location. That's
Probably slide 8, please.
yeah. Yeah, there it is. Look how tiny the trees are in the background. In 1990, so we're going to move forward. In 1990, the statue was vandalized with spray paint and graffiti, and it was repaired that year. And then in 2018, the statue was removed for the Capitol renovations. It was taken apart, and for the past 6 years, it's been stored at the State Museum's off-site facility. After 113 years outdoors, the elements have deteriorated the memorial. Well, during a recent photo shoot at the storage site for our upcoming book, by the way, this is like going to the Indiana Jones site. If you've never been there, it's just remarkable.
Slide 19 would be good.
Yeah. We were there for another reason. We were doing some photographing some artifacts for the Wyoming National Guard book. But we found the pieces of the statue. And I swear to you, I heard John say to me, well, now do something about it. And you know what I simply said? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Roz. I'm trying to find the estimate page. It's in there a little deeper. We'll talk about that. We've corresponded with the folks who restored our beloved Esther Hobart Morris statue, Pacific Coast Conservation. And we have an estimate from them for $1,219.36 to assess the memorial and provide a restoration cost. We've learned through Wendy's wonderful information and through well over at State Construction about the master plan that's going on about all of this. And we've learned about the Path of Honor, which is a wonderful thing. Of course, if you haven't been to the Path of Honor at the Wind River Reservation, it's wonderful. And we think that would be a fitting location to reinstall this memorial. The Wyoming National Guard Historical Society, the National Guard Association, the Wyoming Veterans Commission, and the Wyoming Military Department support those efforts to restore and reinstall that. And we request your support to move this forward and reinstall a 119-year-old beloved statue. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
So Larry, if you'd have presented this to me 3 days ago, I would have put it in the budget yesterday. But I
Of
still,
course.
but I still can.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Do you have an idea of roughly what it might cost? So, I mean, how much was this?
So I just looked that up. I mean, Esther was 37,000 all told. Almost half that cost was moving her down to Denver and back, which I don't really want to use that as a estimate because it's totally different material. It's a really different process in terms of restoring stone versus bronze. And of course, there wasn't necessarily an installation, which would be involved here of creating that foundation and all of that kind of work. But
Since I saw this, it never was on that high of a pedestal. You know, when it was relocated to the corner. So do we have all the pedestal components?
So Kevin, when it's stone like that, are we able to renovate that and restore it?
there could be restoration work done for sure, and I don't know exactly what it would entail. I mean, that is what this initial $1,200 would help us identify is what will it take to restore? What are some potential actions that, you know, because often there are multiple ways that you can go about something like this. So when we've worked with Pacific Coast in the past, you know, they'll provide us with, here are some alternative ways and a pricing structure for each of those on how to proceed. But that's really the first step is to get a professional conservator in there and have them provide us with a plan of action.
So the chairman of appropriations, I'm looking down your direction. If we chose to do it this way, we could run a budget amendment. Also, I guess my question is, are we under the gun to that degree? Are we going to be ready with reestablishing the monument within the next 10 months?
So, so I think it would be fairly simple to run budget amendments. Just peg it at about $75,000 for total costs for this memorial, and have it funded immediately, at least a portion of it, to have the study done. I can't imagine getting a whole lot backfire.
Especially given the content of this memorial, I would hope that we could garner the support. So I guess the question in my mind is, are we going to be ready for it anyway yet? We've got work that our subcommittee has to keep its eye on the ball, and we've got to finish up wayfinding and exhibits. Then whatever support we can give to the other subcommittee, which is the master plan, and Representative Nicholas, I think you're involved in that group too. That really kind of transfers over to that group, how much involvement we will have in the outside grounds.
And so
Off of this committee, I'm not sure, but
it will take, it will take 8 months to a year. My guess is just to get the whole thing fixed and repaired. And so we don't have to have any decision on where it's going to be located, but this is another impetus to actually work on the path we want our concept. So sit to have it ready to go and just make sure that it's ready to be erected when and where we put it.
I don't know how the rest of the subcommittee feels about it. I don't have any problem with recommending or supporting the notion that we ought to renovate, restore the memorial, and where exactly he ends up, that's a decision that can be made at a later date, but I don't have any problem with that, Madam Chairman.
No, and I think you, I'm not sure that this subcommittee is the right vehicle, but the good news is there's people on here that are the right ears. So I think this subcommittee can view this favorably. I think the question is, the path of honor has everybody's very excited about that the State Building Commission has voted on that to say, yes, we want to do that. I think it's important to be honest and recognize that that may not come to fruition for a number of years. I don't know if that's 3, 5, or 10, but I think then the question is, do we want to move forward and go ahead and place it at the north side of the museum where we have our other, where we honor our other heroes? And if that is, okay, for lack of a better terms, like, let's get it restored, then you've got the right path forward. I think technically that State Building Commission would still have to approve that, so this would have to be put to State Building Commission, because this committee does not, and keep me honest, this committee doesn't have purview over that lot. So this committee can neither approve nor deny placement of something on the state museum grounds. But again, if there was money to get going, and just so I think it's clear we're all supportive, but just so you know, the reality that the path of honor is not going to materialize in the next 6 months, most likely, and I wish it could. But I think we want to be really thoughtful about a really good long-term place for that. And we have a couple ideas, but it's not fixed yet. But in the meantime, do we get it restored? Do we get it out? And do we get it where it can be seen and enjoyed, even if it's not in its forever home? Because at that point, it's less likely to be forgotten again. So I guess those would be my thoughts.
Really great points, Madam Chairman. I don't think it hurts if this subcommittee is supportive of the idea that he needs to be fixed. We need to restore the monument. I don't think that endorsement hurts his way forward.
No.
And it certainly gives the representative and me the opportunity to share that with the two chambers, to just say, this is a monument that was dedicated to our war heroes. He needs to be fixed. And I would hope that we could get enough support for that budget amendment. So for the time being, and for what recommendations we can make to the subcommittee, I guess I would ask, is there anyone against the idea that we ought to try to go for a budget amendment to get enough resources to restore him? Does that seem like something we would want to recommend or endorse? The birthday girl is all over it. I think she'll support that amendment on the floor, maybe.
And Treasurer, this was sort of your brainchild a little bit, which we've all sort of latched on to and really like. Does that seem like a reasonable path forward for now? Go ahead and no, we want to restore it.
For inclusion, yeah.
Do we have an idea, what I think, yeah, we need to restore it. That's really the first step here, to make sure that it gets into a position where it doesn't deteriorate. And the second step, I guess, would be, to have some funds for the State Building Commission. Because I think at this point in time, they're the folks that have the authority over that over that land north of the museum and south of the museum, for that matter. I'm more into implementation than studies, but I don't know exactly what kind of study the representative was contemplating in that 75,000, and how much was actually for implementation.
Mr. Treasurer and Representative Nicholas, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the funds appropriated would be to assess options for for restoration and to do the actual restoration and placement. It wouldn't study where it should go. It is simply to bring the physical thing up to what it needs to be.
So would that have, I guess, enough money for the implementation and placement of it upon the adoption by the governing body of that, the decision-making body of wherever it should go?
But Bert, we don't know the answer to that. I think there will be a question, do we erect it in a potentially temporary location? If it's gonna be several years before a permanent location is located and the path of honor is kind of scaled up.
When Mr.
It's just to get it restored and bring it back and have it ready to be placed. And well, how are the powers that be that decide that what's gonna happen to it next? We'll worry about that after we get it fixed.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we get it fixed, but I wouldn't mind a little in this process, the enough money to put it in a temporary location if you know, that's and I don't know if that's another $10,000 to place it or whatever. I guess it's really kind of a best guess anyway. It's 75 for the restoration and getting it ready to go. But
yeah, my guess is that it'll be less expensive than estimated.
I think so. But I don't want to limit us, you know, that basically maybe the language could be for the restoration and the temporary placement if and pick a year, I guess, Bob, if a permanent location can't be determined within 2 years or something, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we're all heading down the same place. We're down the same
Okay.
place.
Yeah. Well, and the restoration isn't going to be done probably within a year's time anyway, so we can come back and revisit it when we're farther down the road. You know, we don't have to, I guess.
I just sent the email to prepare the budget amendments.
Okay, all right.
So,
Sorry.
Madam Chair, I was just gonna look at Wendy and Brianna, make sure that that's reflected in our minutes, that I think there was unanimous support for the restoration of that monument. And I don't think we need a formal vote.
Mr. Chairman, no, you wouldn't need a vote since it's really not technically in the jurisdiction of the subcommittee. You could, however, you might recall the Daughters of the American Revolution 250th commemoration plaque. You did, on behalf of the subcommittee as chairman, write just a courtesy recommendation memo to SBC saying, you know, this came before our committee. It's not within our jurisdiction, but we support the concept. So we could do something similar if you would like.
Madam Chair,
All those in favor say aye.
that feels like that would be appropriate.
Representative Sherwood?
Thank you. So yes, I was gonna ask if we could do a letter of support, and then just so I can speak more knowledgeably about it, if I get questions on the floor, could the slides that were presented be sent out to the committee? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, if it meets with your approval, maybe we send a note on to the SBC with your help, Wendy, and it just reflected. I don't know that we need to say anything about the scope or anything, but just the fact that the subcommittee supports getting that monument prepared for the day that we can either set it in a temporary location or hang on to it for a little bit until we have a clean. And then we'll go to work on that budget. That's going to be somewhat important. So really appreciate you guys coming.
And I have to tell you that I nicknamed the statue Wandering Willie. And I can tell you how appropriate this seems right now, because he's kind of wandered all over the Capitol
There's a
grounds,
couple of
you know?
Willies in this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd go with the British contemplation of Wandering Willie there, guys.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay, with that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you both.
Well, thank you on behalf of all those
Yeah.
supporting organizations. We salute you for considering this. And keeping in mind, we're honoring both the war dead from that war and those who served. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Since we've sort of veered and gone into public comment, is there any other public comment? Going once?
Thanks again, folks.
All right, let's move into our 10:30 agenda item, which is acoustics.
Madam Chair, we do have Todd with Trainer HL online, so he'll be giving us the update along with the Bond Acoustics. I think, John, are you on?
We have a slide deck.
Yes,
I am here.
We don't have a slide deck. Hey, Todd.
Yes.
Could you send us the slide deck real quick?
Send you the slide deck?
Yeah. Is that possible? I know you're making some updates this morning.
You mean the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, yes.
Ooh, I would have to print it out. Right now it's just in PowerPoint. It's pretty big. Zach, I don't know, Zach, Zach's on the line too. You might be able to do it.
I can get on it.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Just just send it to you, Will?
Yeah, and I'll get it on.
Okay. Okay, great. Do you want me to wait till that shows up or go ahead, Will?
I'd say go ahead.
Okay. Good morning. Again, my name is Todd Renier, Associate Principal with Trainer HL, and joining me on the call is Zach Cornice, who's the project architect with Trainer HL, and as noted earlier, John Hodgson, engineer with Avant Acoustics. The basic purpose for today is to provide an update on the progress and to answer any outstanding questions the subcommittee might have. I do want to start out with some new information that we've titled Historic Precedent, and want to show appreciation for the recent research by Will. This letter dated December 20th, 1916 from the United States Acoustical Correction Company asked whether the state of Wyoming is ready to move forward with provisions for the betterment of the hearing conditions in either the House, Senate chambers, or the Supreme Court. This letter is from Mazer AccuStyle Company to the Wyoming Capitol Building Commission dated February 2nd, 1917, 107 years ago, explaining the issues of reverberation in the House and Senate chambers of 3.7 and 3.0 seconds, while the recommendation was 1.5 seconds at the time. A contract with Mazer AccuStyle Company from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was signed on February 28, 1917 to correct the issues within the Senate and House chambers where the acoustics are unsatisfactory, defective, and imperfect. In December 1917, and as a side note, the Wyoming Capitol was included in an acoustical in the AccuStyle Company's advertisement, as you can see on the right. Mazer AccuStyle Company was established in 1909 and employed both acoustical engineers and contractors. AccuStyle was a permanent wall and ceiling treatment proposed for ceilings and upper wall surfaces and guaranteed to effect a complete correction of all acoustical defects. The product was touted to not cause any change in appearance of the rooms and not in any way mar the decorations. AccuStyle was treated animal hair, which was concealed behind a fireproof fabric membrane, which could be decorated in any color or design. And one note, it is important to remember that when a material was noted as fireproof at that time, it was most likely included asbestos containing materials. AccuStyle details would typically show the use of smaller tiles or large flat areas. Each option would also normally include a wood border. If you note in the projecting surface higher on the wall in the historic image of the Senate chamber, this most likely represented at least one of the locations where the AccuStyle product was originally installed, and explains the double layer of material under the existing murals that were noted in our visits to the Capitol. While additional research is required, it is important for the state of Wyoming to note that acoustic issues were originally identified and addressed when the 1916-1917 additions were constructed. Fast forward 107 years, and this subcommittee, the State Building Commission, and the Wyoming legislature must once again address these issues. So for a quick overview of the critical factors identified in the project charter. General project understandings are: we are working in an historic building and do not want to negatively impact previous investments. Phased incremental approaches may be valid and may be fiscally responsible. However, this will be more costly if all recommendations are eventually implemented. We need to now have conversations with stakeholders, including the State Historic Preservation Officer, and trigger the notice to the State Building Commission. Scope of work should be based on a balanced approach regarding project quality, budget, scope, and schedule. And we need to set a schedule that implements some or all scopes of work as soon as possible. Our recommendation report will identify options and include costs for each option, analyze options based on return on investment and performance of solutions. The decision-making process cannot proceed without this subcommittee's thoughtful evaluation and recommendations for this project. The statutory requirements for initiating a project are cited in 9-5, -106 of the State Building Commission, Note E. No architectural or structural alteration to the Capitol building or its grounds shall be made without the approval of the State Building Commission, except for emergency maintenance as provided. For in this subsection, the State Building Commission shall not approve any architectural or structural alteration to the Capitol building or grounds without providing notice to the Management Council of the legislature and without legislative session convening and adjourning after notice was provided to the Management Council. The next steps for us will be production of final design and construction documents, follow the state's bidding and procurement process, and lastly, construction. So to reiterate the process we underwent, we did research and created benchmarking. We prioritized the spaces. We then recommended a scope of work. And we revised our preliminary cost estimates. So basically, according to this, the CCS most recent updated cost estimate, if the entire high priority work were completed in an incremental fashion with the 25% premium for each scope item taken separately, the cost could be in the range of $2.2 million. If the entire low priority work were completed in an incremental fashion with the 25% premium for each scope treated separately, the cost could be in the range of $840,000. And therefore, if an incremental approach is taken for the entire scope of work, with the 25% premium increases, the total cost could be in the range of $3 million. So with those previous two cost breakdowns, we have reiterated what the individual spaces, the high priority work could cost if again taken incrementally. And from these last slides, this is why it is important, we believe, for the state to weigh the benefits of taking an incremental approach versus moving forward with a single larger project. And at that, if there's any questions.
Mr. Chair, I would just add real quick too that, as we mentioned last time too, some of the recommendations for some of the mechanical units and things like that would be handled with separate funds like major maintenance or those things, so.
Yeah, and with this sheet that I'm showing right now, you can see the high priority. Again, these are the individual items that was in our first recommendation sheet. And then off to the right, the additional costs for the other individual rooms. And then the sound system recommendations we noted are included, except for the mobile sound system would be the 15 to 18,000. And Will, as you noted, the lower priority HVAC miscellaneous spaces would be from a potential unique source of funding.
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman. How after spending $300 million, we got problems with HVAC? I mean, what are the problems in the HVAC?
Mr. Treasurer, and I'll have somebody jump in when I say this incorrectly. I don't think there's any trouble with the HVAC and the way it's operating and heating the cooling the building. I don't know if all sounds that the HVAC makes and where those sounds are made were contemplated, and some of these spaces may have a vent that is always running and isn't loud and isn't within all parameters, but it's something that Trainer has identified. Like if you were to eliminate this or change the HVAC system in some way. Did I get that? That was a real shot in the dark.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just remember the conversation that we put a lot of the HVAC in those little cabinets at the end of rooms in different places, so everything was kind of enclosed, and that was, I guess represented that was going to take care of any acoustic problems that we were going to have, and I guess I bring this forward, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairman, and about that. If we're going to remodel another building, maybe we get the acoustic things in there when we're putting the HVAC things in. So we're doing it right the first time. So we're not having to do some incremental approaches that are more costly. So that's just kind of I think a way that we ought to contemplate and mark that down as the right way to do a remodel rather than doing the remodel twice. So,
Mr. Treasurer, I couldn't agree more.
okay.
So I think and just for the record, I mean, this is hilarious. This historical stuff is fantastic and hilarious.
Yeah.
And certainly I think, speaking for myself a little bit, gets us a little bit out of we couldn't possibly put anything on it was never, nope, it was. And in fact, they were having not only similar, but identical conversations 107 years ago. So
do those papers have the total scope of work of what was done on all, each building?
I can tell you that each chamber cost about $2,800. So whatever you got for that.
I don't think we can vacuum the rug for that.
But Madam Chair and Representative Nicholas, I am trying to find additional information on the actual scope of work
That'd be cool.
that was done, but yeah, I haven't found anything yet. It's pretty cool.
And any more of those pictures? This is a great picture day.
Yeah, right.
So just to answer a little bit of your question, Treasurer Meyer, we've been, ever since the heating duct system has been completed, we've had them come back, multiple times to make them quieter. They were represented when they were constructed that they would be quiet, and that representation just didn't hold true. I think now we're kind of past the warranty phase. And so we're at a place where they've come back repeatedly. If we had to do it over again, we probably wouldn't use that exact system. So we've had this group look at the cost of buffering the units that are in the various rooms. I mean, in some of they're noisier in other rooms, like in Don Richards' office for a while, you couldn't hardly have hold a conversation. It was so noisy. And in the governor's conference room in his office, it's still quite noisy. And so this is our way of saying, well, we still have to fix the problem.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess the question is, do these acoustical firms like the one we're working with, do they do any consulting in the construction phase? I would hope that's part of their business.
So that's the other component of it. We had acoustics in the original capital design, but it was removed because of cost constraints.
So, Madam Chairman, that speaks to the old adage that you know what value engineering is. It engineers the value out of the building. Yeah, so that's unfortunate, but this is really great work. So Will, I guess my question is for the subcommittee, what's next? Are we looking at the support of additional budget, or is this something I understand that we could stretch the budget that's been given to this and maybe incorporate major maintenance funding? Can you help me with that, Will, please?
Yeah, we do have a budget that was allocated previously.
Is that $1 million?
It was $1 million, but that also includes design fees and everything else.
So where are we in that post-dollar?
I think, I kind of estimated what the next phase for design would be with trainer's help. I think right now we're just under 600,000 left or available for the actual construction of, say, acoustic treatments.
So by the way, I could tell by the little things they tweaked in the JAC, there was less reverberation than there's been in the past. So it definitely helped.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would hope if we had the funds available, which I think you probably could, and we can get a warranty from this particular contractor.
Just like the last
we just do it all and do it right the second or third time now. And but as long as we get a performance warranty that it's going to be in a measurable decibels or however it can be measured and warranted, and we just get it taken care of and make that recommendation.
Well, Treasurer, I think our approach has been, we're gonna do it in an incremental phase, and as money allows, and so we can kind of test the product and what the work that's done to see if it actually works. And the more effective that it is, the more likely that the legislature will pay more money to improve it further. So we still have dollars left to at least go, if we work through the timesheets and the high priorities, that we can kind of selectively work through those. And my guess is that this probably isn't the time and place to actually pick and choose which ones, but I think we just need to move forward with it.
And for myself, and I know that the prime problem is the capital, and the capital is not exclusively the legislature's problem, but it's mostly the legislature's problem. So I really do think how much money is given drives the decision of what to do. I think and again, I'll take a stab at this and someone can correct me, the little bit of fire that we have to put out like in the next 2 days, anything we do in terms of touching ceilings or walls has to be notified to SBC and Management Council, and that comes from that statute that he read off. Essentially, we have to notify any structural change before and the statute's a little unusual, but we have to notify before a session starts. So I think the idea is I think what we need from this committee today is a recommendation to move forward and to give that notification. Now, that in no way means we are going to go over there tomorrow and start sticking stuff up on the walls. That will go through our very careful process. And again, there has to be money, which right now there's not. But I think the concern is if we don't check that box of notification, we cannot move forward on anything structural until the next session for that statute. So I think, does that sort of align with your thinking, Bob? So I think it's important that maybe we take a little more formal vote saying we want to move forward and tell everybody that we are considering this suite of solutions. We are committed to nothing. We may end up only tweaking the system or only putting down rugs but we want to, I think, keep our options open to the fullest extent. And if the legislature comes in and says, do it all, then we can at least move forward with whatever. And then I think you all and throughout the session have these conversations, but we really need to make that notice in the next 2 days before the session.
Yeah, I mean, Madam Chairman, I think you're absolutely correct. We need to make that notification. I'd like some clarification on what is considered incremental, because there's not much, I think, that we can do acoustically during the session. And, you know, whether if we could get something that would be a definition of incremental, is that anything over a time period that has not been contracted before July 1 of 2025. That way we have this whole summer and we have 3 months to contract after the session before July 2025. If we could get that distinction between incremental and non-incremental, you know, because I'm not sure whether or not, you know, we can do that or not, but that's something that I hope we could negotiate with the contractor.
Well, and again, please anyone jump in, because I feel like I'm stumbling through this a little bit. I think the idea of incremental is the recommissioning of the audio system. That's one of the lower hanging fruits. The HVAC usage of the microphones, which costs zilch, and see where that gets us. And then I think that's where the legislature comes in and says, not good enough, let's give more money.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get 2 legislative sessions in there, you know, that so we get basically a pilot thing that tells us that what they're saying they can do, but gives us two budget sessions, gets us through a supplemental budget before we're going past incremental. And I don't know whether that's possible or not. So
Treasurer Meyer, I think you hit on something, and I think going back to what the co-chairman outlined for us, I agree. I think that what this notification would be on behalf of the subcommittee is a scope of work, all encompassing. The work that we intend to do could include any of the following, and a more detailed outline will be presented to SBC and to the management council as that is further delineated, but
Yeah.
Treasurer Meyer, that you're trying to capture that this is the notification before a legislative session. That
Yeah,
this is
absolutely. I think we move forward with that. I just want to make sure that as we go through this process, because it's a 25% hit between incremental and non-incremental, we ought to have a clear line that we actually understand, and then the legislators can make, I think, a more informed decision about how much money they want to put forth and how much money they want to basically fix something at 125% rather than 100%. You know, so that's I hopefully we can in the contract negotiations we can have that clear delineation and make it as flexible as we possibly can. So that's where I'm at. Let's move forward with the notification. If you need a motion, Madam Chairman, I so move that we notify the appropriate parties.
Thank you, Treasurer.
No, I second that, and what I would suggest is that we have that construct the letter and let the two co-chairs finalize it, just identifying all those things.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah, I'm good with that. If there's no further discussion, call for the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And again, I think not to be too casual, but I think the point is if the legislature didn't want us to do anything, then they have the opportunity to.
So do we want to go back to Todd and go through the high priority list and just get some comments on what would be the most
I think
efficient?
that would be really helpful, or, you know, say, I mean, I think a lot of things could come out of the session, but so if we have $1 million to spend, where would we spend it? And if we have 1.5, where would it go?
Well, Madam Chairman, I think this is, we're quite a ways down the path at this point, as you looked at high priority versus low priority. And it feels like to me, with the budget that we have available, and it's to include some major maintenance funding, it feels like to me, we can begin throughout this year to address quite a bit of things. And then if we have a more detailed approach and the need for a little bit more budget, then you go into that next budget season and you present that at the next session of the legislature. But I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud with everything.
Mr. Chairman, and we might have trainers speak to this, but they will be bringing back more and more robust information each month that you meet. The purposes for this is they wanted to update, as you requested at your last meeting, the cost estimating with some more granular levels. So there's a little bit better understanding of, you know, how much joint approps is generally, because these are still high level cost estimates versus the chambers. So the idea here is to take this condensed report that doesn't include all the details you saw last month, and we can attach that to the notification letter. Once that notification is done, as per that governance statute, then you do have the time as a committee with the funds that are available to start making those decisions.
You know, this is a pretty good outline, and I think we'll probably find, Madam Chairman, that, you know, things always run more than you think they're going to, and the thing that I like about incremental is that we can evaluate as we go, and Will has explained that as in the last couple of meetings that but, you know, the treasurer's right, you don't want that to drive more and more budget either, so we've got some things to consider as we go.
Well, and I really appreciate this high level report because I think this will help us as we move forward because it's, you know, there's always going to be a limited amount of money. So triaging you know, we've had some discussions about, well, where's the public involved? We want to prioritize those spaces and where is, you know, we all know the JAC room is awful and it's really impactful and it's all important that we hear it. And it's all important that they hear each other. You know, that's gonna be at the top of my list, so.
Well, in the ceremonial room, so I think we, as a subcommittee and you know, I think we just know that there are certain priorities that are gonna get hit within this year. I think we can get started on some really important things.
Yep.
And as we go, like Wendy pointed out, we're gonna get more and more detail. We're gonna have the opportunity to dig deeper into every one of these individual projects. The appropriations committee room being one of them, probably number one, but. So are we good with the information you need, Wendy, to help us with a notification? Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
And Mr. Chair, before we leave this subject to you, we do have Avant online as well, who will give us an update on the commissioning that they did to the AV systems too. You're ready for that?
Yes, please.
Thanks for turning it over to me, Will. I'm gonna share my screen actually. And I have an excerpt. We've created what we're calling an after action report. We were on site 2 weeks ago now to perform some of the, as we've kind of called it, incremental changes in rooms in the Capitol. We were adjusting the microphones and how the sound system performs in the spaces listed here. I've got the executive summary shown on screen. And overall, we think we made a pretty decent improvement. In fact, I think I overheard someone mention that maybe you've already experienced the JAC system maybe this last week for a meeting. Maybe I missed. That is true.
Yeah.
And how did it perform?
Well, it was less reverberatory. Is that the right word?
Okay. So was it maybe easier to understand people talking, perhaps?
Long way to go, but it was definitely better.
Yeah. And that is kind of the point, right? We've made as much improvement as we can from the electronic side, if you will. You know, we didn't change the actual acoustics of the room. We just changed how the system operated. So it sounds like, you know, the room sounded less reverberant. Well, that was probably just related to the speakers and the microphones being maybe better balanced, but the room acoustics are still the same. The overall wall surfaces have not been changed. So, you know, throughout this report, we kind of go back through what we were intending to do, a couple hurdles that we came across on site that maybe we weren't able to do because of technical limitation. But overall, we measurably improved the performance in all of the spaces with regard to speech intelligibility and the sound system response. You know, for example, in the House chamber, this kind of shows the measure of intelligibility that we've been using as a guide, and the sort of green highlighted cells are showing the measurable improvement that we've made to that system performance, and also sort of the response of the system before and after our adjustments.
So are you making people more intelligent by so we can hear them better?
So, another dad joke.
One thing you also may have noticed, maybe on that intelligence side of things, is some stickers I think have been started to be added to microphones to help prompt the users to operate the system correctly and use the microphones properly. And as was mentioned earlier, that does go a really long way in the systems working as well as they can. It starts with the users, so. I don't want to necessarily go through this whole report unless you want to, but are there any questions or anything specific that you want to go over?
My question is, what would you do next? If you-
So the next step from our recommendation is to, proceed with the acoustical treatment upgrades that have been discussed in the previous section. The
Which one?
performance of these systems works hand in hand. And there's only so much you can do with the electronic systems. So we've basically made them work as well as they can, considering the existing acoustical characteristics of each room. And now moving forward, improving the acoustical characteristics of the room will make the systems work better. And we've kind of reached the limit with what we can do from the electronic side.
So one of your recommendations was to have drop mics, I think, in the JAC room. And I just,
Different loudspeakers was actually, I think, what we had been talking about. In JAC specifically, that room has loudspeakers distributed on the desks and the testimony table, and then also has 2 loudspeakers on the wall for the gallery. In the size of room that is, there is not a great reason to have such a distributed loudspeaker system. It adds a lot more sources to the room, which can, maybe as you mentioned, make the room sound more reverberant because you have a lot of disparate sources making noise. Because of the low ceiling height and sort of arrangement of the room, moving to a distributed overhead loudspeaker system similar to the public meeting rooms should result in a better performance from that system due to how the loudspeakers are currently arranged. Speaking of the JAC room, this was the measurements taken in there.
I think you meant high ceiling, like heights rather than low. But my question is, how do you hang them from the ceiling, or how do you impact the current building structure by doing?
So in the JAC, those loudspeakers would be flush mounted in the ceiling, so they would not hang. They would not hang down from that. They would be circles that are directly embedded, if you will, in that ceiling plane, not unlike the public meeting rooms or like the gallery of the House and Senate chambers.
Like this room.
And like this room, yes.
So the higher the ceiling, my guess is the less that works.
Correct, which is why it would not be a solution for, say, the Senate or House chambers. Those ceilings would be really too high for that to function well.
So the ceiling height in the JAC is probably 25 feet, close to it in the center. That's why I'm curious about that recommendation.
In the JAC room?
Yeah, maybe 18 feet.
Yeah, that ceiling is quite a bit lower than, say, the Senate or House chambers, and would work fine with a ceiling loudspeaker distribution. It's probably maybe similar to a public meeting room, except in the center where it peaks upwards, 3 or 4 feet higher.
So, do you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, the decision in this room was made because of the decoratively painted ceiling. It was actually recommended at the time by K2 to put in the ceiling speakers the same way you have in all the other public meeting rooms. But there was a concern, you might recall at that time, about the stenciling, but Evergreen was later able to go into the historic Supreme Court, for example, and actually stencil over some non-historic elements such as sprinkler heads with some colored pencil. And so trainers thought here was a similar approach could be done so that it doesn't impact the stenciling on that ceiling.
So I assume that that ceiling discussion we just had would probably come into play in rooms 110 and 113. Those ceilings are pretty high, right? So,
Mr. Chairman, those ceilings actually already have ceiling speakers. It's and Todd might want to speak more to that. In those rooms, it's the AV system is set up properly for the way you would do your speakers and microphones. It's more a matter of just the hard surfaces in those spaces.
Yeah, that's correct, Wendy.
yeah, the sound really bounces in there. Those are tough rooms.
Andrew, did you have a comment?
I did. Have we checked to make sure we have enough room where there's nothing, there's an obstacle inside the ceiling to have something sunken in? Because I know there's some of the walls we have that are pretty thin as far as what we have for space.
Yeah, that would be part of our next phase. If a scope is defined, we would be trying to get above the ceiling and figure out exactly if it's a drop plaster ceiling, is it directly applied to a structural element? Those would be the things we would have to vet out in order to work with Avant to locate the speakers. We're assuming it's a hung chipboard ceiling system or plaster.
And Mr. Chairman, the other place where there are ceiling speakers identified are in the galleries, and it's more a matter of there's already flush mount ceiling speakers there. It's a matter of their location and additional locations. But in the Joint Appropriations Committee, there's actually an open attic area above that. So that may prove to be less of a problem than in the galleries.
So I guess, Madam Chairman, my question to our speakers, and really appreciate you being here. What can we anticipate seeing, say, for the March meeting, the April meeting going forward? What can we expect in terms of this work? How can the subcommittee be helpful to what's ahead?
Yeah, our intention for the next meeting is, as Wendy mentioned earlier, we're going to provide a full report, a detailed report showing the new information we got from Will today with the AccuStyle product, along with all of our recommendations that we presented last month and the updated cost estimates. If the committee does make recommendations on exactly what they want to go with, if they help us define that scope, we might be able to pull that apart and actually produce a separate spreadsheet that would show the recommended scope of work.
Thank you for that. Appreciate
it. Have we sort of rounded out acoustics for now, or?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I have one more, which is there had been discussion about a letter from this subcommittee to the legislature with just a few reminders about, hey, we've done this work. Here's the improvements that have been made. We're still looking at these other solutions, but here's some great tips that you can do for free. The subcommittee wanted to have that memo drafted. We do that on behalf of the co-chairs.
I think we do.
And for everybody's knowledge, essentially, there's a lot we need to do acoustically, but one of the, again, free things we could do is using mics correctly. I think the legislature is going to tell legislators that as well, but I think the more reminders, the better. So I think the envision is we would also remind them to use your mics correctly.
Yeah. Since this is the knowledgeable subcommittee, I think a recommendation from this committee will be important. And I would expect leadership to fall back on whatever memo we send and say, hey, let's try to do better. So yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, Wendy. That we had talked about that a month ago. So.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, for Representative Sherwood, Representative Nicholas, and yourself, we may have you visit with leadership about There's a few opportunities for training coming up on Monday, and a few times you'll be all together. We may, we as staff don't necessarily want to lecture members, so we might put you in that position.
You get your chance yesterday, we can do it.
I know, we didn't take you up on that.
We waited until we were called.
Yeah, and you know, we often say that we cannot get fellow legislators to listen. But maybe
Well, it's
we
because they
can.
can't hear you.
Maybe I'll go better this time.
It's a catch-22.
Yeah. Appreciate these guys.
Okay, is that it for acoustics for now? Thank you, LSO, for drafting a magical memo in the next 48 hours for us to get out to everybody. Thanks. Okay, now we're going to have a conversation about extended Capitol Square building hours recommendations, which it sounds like there's been some movement on. Maybe too much movement.
I think it's good. I'll let Wendy talk about it. She drafted it.
Mr. Chairman, since I wasn't at Approps yesterday, I'm not sure where you ended up with what went into.
It was adopted, your language.
Okay, Madam Chair, the Joint Appropriations Committee budget bill at this point, and you may need to help me if it's actually in ANI's budget. I haven't followed that closely, or if it's a separate section, but there is funding to keep the Capitol building open on Saturdays. And based on some discussions we had with ANI and Highway Patrol earlier this year, we thought a little bit broader language to include the possibility of extended hours during weekdays in the summer. And the possibility of some special events might be appropriate in that same appropriation.
That's correct.
So,
And I guess that
What was the amount that you asked for?
Representative Sherwood
So was
is,
it 350? I get the different ones folks.
I believe so.
Yeah. So that's in the budget.
And the reason the good chairman wanted to bring this to this subcommittee's attention is just to start thinking about, as going through this year, towards the end of the year, with having more exhibits in the building, how you give people opportunities who might not otherwise be able to come down and see those exhibits during normal Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 business hours. So it's mainly just as a point for this subcommittee. And obviously the budget bill hasn't hit the floor yet, and we won't know till March for sure where it comes to pass for ANI's budget, but just as kind of an update at this point. And I don't know if
so
Andrew.
Wendy, the only thing I would ask is this, this is not necessarily immediate. If the budget is approved and it goes through, that's good to know that we have that to draw from, but is the idea to start this even before we have the historical exhibits? And you know, I just don't know that we're ready to throw the hours open at this point, or am I just not thinking about this correctly?
Mr. Chairman, it was actually piloted last interim, and I might turn to Andrew and Lori to talk a little bit about that, as well as Rihanna with the docents. So there was a pilot program during last summer's Saturday timeframe.
Thank you for reminding me. I had forgotten that.
I haven't had a chance to talk to Director Bach about the language that JC wound adopted yet. Last year we were able to do it. Lori was one of the key folks. She adjusted her schedule. We had another person adjust their schedule so that they could do alternating Saturdays. I think we made it through the summer, but I think we determined it's not really a sustainable way to do kind of this kind of in perpetuity. So I do have a little bit of concern that without additional staffing, we may not be able to do what we were able to do last summer without having somebody who's kind of more on the permanent basis being able to do that. But I haven't had a chance to talk to the director. The 350,000, I think, was more than what we needed last summer. That would change if we added staff, because like Lori adjusted her schedule, so she only worked her 40 hours, but Saturdays, every other Saturday was included as part of that. So we didn't overtime for our staff for that.
We gonna having reversions, a substantial reversions.
Mhm.
And so I think the plan would be that we would use those reverted funds plus additional whatever appropriated funds to have enough personnel to keep open on the weekends.
I don't know if we need any tweaks or anything to allow us to actually hire folks to do it, because right now I think it is funding, it's unspecified by division, so it's, could be 100, could be whatever.
When do we have to look at that and just allow temporary personnel to be hired during the summer?
I'll talk to Director Bach too and see if that's what she's interested in, and we can get you any kind of recommendations on that.
We start paying Fred Emmerich for every time.
Thanks for catching me back up. Appreciate it.
So do we need anything from this committee on that? Sounds like the ball's rolling. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, that it's hard to fit, I mean, it's hard to fit somebody who's been hired for Monday through Friday and reliably make that work.
We did add a personnel in the budget if it passes for here, to be a curator type position. And so that person can kind of wrap into it as well.
That's good. Nice.
Other duties as a son.
Madam Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, is there any additional requirement for highway patrol, or is the staff they have on hand just sufficient over nights and weekends? I just wondered if that was also had to be in that.
We've talked to the highway patrol before, and I think they are concerned about anytime the building is open. I think my understanding is they want to have an armed patrolman. They want to have a trooper here if they can. They've been kind of understaffed, and it's been difficult for them to fill all their positions. So they've been doing overtime instead of having someone who's sort of dedicated. They did overtime all summer. As a backup, they would have a SecOps armed person, which they have the ability to have a contract with contract security for that. But that's sort of their kind of last resort. Hopefully they're able to have somebody. So I don't know if they have a concern that they don't have enough positions necessarily, or if it's one of those they could staff it more reliably if they just were able to fill all the vacancies that they have.
More of the latter.
Yeah, so I think that might be more of what they're needing. They do have a backup of a contract and contract funds they can use if they need to supplement their staff.
Does that have to be highway patrol, or would we be able to give them the opportunity to look at other sources to fill a position to take care of a Saturday, for example? In other words, retired police officers, sheriffs, deputies.
Mr. Co-Chair, I think, I don't know what discretion the statute provides already, but there is a statute that gives responsibility for security in the Capitol and then in the elected officials' offices in Hirschler. That responsibility is given to YDOT, Highway Patrol. So I don't know if that language is broad enough they could look at temporary or not. And I think it also they may have by statute designated the amount of troopers that they have. I want to say that there's that's like a set number. So
That's something to think about. We certainly, I don't want to tie their hands. We certainly want a high level of, protection for the grounds of the building, but there are some good retirees out across this county that might be available. I don't know. So, okay.
I will make sure to check in with Division O and make sure they're aware of the amendment what was put in the budget.
Just for the information of the subcommittee by March, it'd be interesting to know.
So I can't remember which committee, if it was this committee or other committees that I'm on, but we explored that possibility, and we're just hiring a local private entity who are essentially retired. Their concern was make sure that they have a pistol, that they have all the extra training, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, which would be the cost savings, which wouldn't, I think it was a year ago we had those discussions, but. And those will always obviously come back up again, and they'll get addressed one way or another.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Nelson, it's just something to consider, you know, with the summer hours, that is when there's a lot of more robust visitation in the building. That is one of the reasons I think why policymakers are interested in keeping it open, because there's just a lot of interest in coming to the Capitol. And so I think that's just something to consider. That's where you see visitation over 200 regularly, because there's the summer travel season and there's lots of people in the building. So that's something to consider.
Bring your A game, in other words. Yes.
Yeah, it's just speaking from the volunteer docents, you know, it's kind of a tag team effort with them and Lori and the A&I employee. From a volunteer perspective and the age of our volunteers, they appreciate the support of a paid person on staff, because they're not equipped to handle the situation, or should they be if the toilet's flooding, or, you know, if there's building issues. And then additionally, they feel more secure when there's another body across the hall and the support of security.
And when it's somebody who knows the building, has all the keys, has all the access, knows all the, you know.
Part of why they're
resources.
successful is they like to focus on welcoming people and talking to people, but that's pretty much where their duties start and finish.
Well, Division O has an office in the building, and I think they have cameras as well, so, and they're always there. So, I mean, there's just ways to work on it. I'm sure everyone's as comfortable as we can for.
Yeah, we just, I think, always want to be aware of those little issues, sort of peripheral issues that may keep us from opening the Capitol as much as we want to. It's not so simple as just adding hours. It's like what just mentioned, it's really important that we have the right people here to take care of this place, especially now that we've invested even more into this Capitol Square.
All right, well, I think, go ahead. Did I forget something?
No, I just want to pin you down, Madam Chair and members of the committee, on additional meeting dates.
That's where I was gonna
Okay.
go.
We have some tentative dates on the calendar, and I would like your confirmation on them now, because as the legislative session starts, your schedules will be spoken for with your other assignments, so we'd like this one added to the list. So your two confirmed meeting dates are during session. We have a March 6th meeting, and that will be dependent on our legislators' schedules, perhaps a morning meeting, but we'll confirm that as your schedules allow and where your commitments are. And then we have a confirmed April 24th meeting date. But now I would like you to confirm a May date and a June date.
So the first options are May 21st or 22nd. Those are both fine for me. Bob?
I never know that far in advance.
We've got all kinds of legislative meeting dates flying around.
So
Which-
that's, as soon as we get this one, it'll be corresponded with the rest of your meeting dates, but we gotta get this one, so then your other committees move around your guys' schedule.
Right now, I
Yeah.
can do either. Yeah, May 21st or 22nd.
Treasurer Meyer?
Yeah, well, I always had either WRS or WCDA that conflicts with this, guys, or something else, so. The 21st, I'm free after 10 o'clock. The 22nd, I'm gonna be in Saratoga at WRS on the 22nd and 23rd.
Okay, so let's, everybody for now, pencil in.
2020, yeah, 24th is fine, but 21st?
Yes, 21st.
I will just say the superintendent does have a conflict on the 21st.
Okay, the 20th is fine with me too. I've got nothing going on there. So,
Okay, so for now, I guess we're penciling in the 21st.
okay,
Subject to, yeah, if 12 other legislative meetings show up then.
And I'm good on both the June dates.
So June
For today.
25th and 26th are the next ones.
Probably prefer the 25th.
I'm okay with those.
Okay, so we will confirm and get May 21st, June 25th on the legislative calendar, and we'll send out a tentative meeting notice via Outlook, and we will get those dates so you don't have conflicting meeting dates with your other committees.
so that's June 25th and 6th, 2 days or,
1 day.
Just one day.
okay.
Do
So
both
I'll
of
be able to make part of the June 25th one. So. Probably anything after 9:30, I should be good.
Start that one at
I made it.
9 in the morning.
Yep, I made 2 notes to start later for Treasurer Meyer.
All right, well, look how timely we are. Is there any last call for public comment? Okay, hearing none. What do we have coming to us as far as homework?
Madam Chair, I think it will be this deck you saw today. If
Okay.
you have any comments on content, it is generally the same content map you had approved quite a while ago, along with the associated maps of where everything was to be located. But this version has kind of more of the meat on the bone, so to speak. So we would like everybody to take a look at that so that Wyoming Historical Society, they've already started writing, they've written some grounds and first floor, and they've written second and third floor as a first draft, but they would want to know as soon as possible if there's, anything you think they're missing or anything you think is not needed so that we don't we want to use their time wisely in what they're writing.
Okay. And would we expect to get any content review before our next meeting or not necessarily?
I don't believe so, but yeah, I did just issue a new schedule. We can check on that as
Okay.
Rachel mentioned, they're gonna try to give you first some content that shows up like these boards, so you have a sense of what you're getting. And I believe that might be grounds or first floor, and then after that, they're just gonna go back to the way it's written, basically in a Word document. And then they'll upload that into design documents, just because it's easier for them to edit when
Yeah,
it's
that-
not in the design document, but they want you to start with one to understand when it says headline, what that's gonna look like.
Okay. And for the map, the Hirschler map and whatnot, this sounds like if you don't make that, like, this is it. No changes after this review. Is that fair?
Yes, and I would say, they did go back to, I think that was 2 meetings ago, the comments that you all made standing around that map, we felt they did a good job of incorporating your concerns on that, so the map has come a long ways.
And then just as a follow-up to that, Madam Chair, your core team is reviewing the content. Round, we're making edits, and then it's coming to you hopefully in somewhat more of a polished final form. So you're not seeing the first rough draft, and it's following that content outline pretty tightly. So that's something that we're doing on your behalf. So it's coming to you hopefully in your more of a final.
So between now and March 6th, do you anticipate that do we need to review what we received today and try to get back what point, a week out from March 6th?
Mr. Chairman, I think this stack, they'd probably like a week review time, recognizing you're coming upon session. But then I don't think you'd have any other reviews. And frankly, it's everything you've already seen and approved during schematic design. This just puts a little more detail, like who is going to be profiled. So I don't think you'd need to spend a lot of time with it. And you can also wait until you see the actual floor by floor write-ups if you prefer.
Yeah, it's really busy starting Saturday, so, okay.
No, I think that's all. Thank you. I think this has been a brief but productive and efficient meeting. So without objection, I'll consider us adjourned.
Happy birthday. Yeah, happy birthday.
Birthday.
Happy birthday.
Should say that.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I had one quick question. If folks could remind me what the material is that Hathaway sign is gonna be made of? Is that gonna be like bronze or is that gonna be something more?
Yeah.
Sorry, Hirschler. Yes, thank
It
you.
is not the map.
Yeah,
It is not bronze.
okay,
I remember them saying something,
It's
it is
acrylic.
going to be
okay.
not super easy to change, but specifically not bronze, easier to change.
The term was not buku bucks, right?
The concern,
okay.
is probably weight, right?
Is actually the potential of agencies moving or tweaking of, most of those things are not gonna move. The auditor's office is not gonna move, but
No.
whether
yeah.
behavioral health department is on a particular floor or those things.
Yeah.
They might change over time.
Yes.
Anything that could have agencies moving will be in a bronze frame with an acrylic that's a cleat system, if I recall, for how it's anchored in. So you could have a new acrylic printed. That will be also true with all the acrylics in the Hirschler building itself. There'll be slide out inserts. The Capitol is a little bit different in that it is tooled bronze, but we don't expect House and Senate chambers to move. So the thought was we're probably a little more secure on those not changing.
For fun.
But DI was advised that those Hirschler agencies can and do change.
Thank you.
Yeah, make your life easier.
I have all this.